Let's review. There are three main types of balances: the electronic balance and torsion balance with either a dialer or a rider. Electronic balances do not require external balancing weights in comparison to the torsion balance. Electronic balances are capable of tearing or zeroing carriers. Electronic balances can measure 1 milligram quantities in comparison to the torsion balance. Electronic balances provide faster readings. Important components of the torsion balance to remember include 2 removable weighing pans, 2 adjustable leveling screws, a rest knob, dial or rider, index plate, and lid. The torsion balance operates on the principle of torsion. There are 4 types of qualification tests: the sensitivity requirement test, arm ratio test, shift test, and the rider and graduated beam test. A balance is considered acceptable only if it passes all 4 tests. Always clean and properly store the balance after use. Pans should always remain arrested during maintenance. Use a camel hair brush, dry tissue, or vacuum to remove powders, crystals, and dry substances. Use dampened alcohol gauze pads for oleaginous substances like oil and ointment. Use water-dampened gauze pads for water-soluble substances like dry syrup or sorbitol solution. Do not get any liquids or powders inside support rod holes. Before shipping, arrest the balance and lock internal shipping arrest posts. Wrap pans and support rods in tissue and store it inside the lid. Let's review. Glassine and bond paper are the 2 most common types of weighing paper. Weighing paper can be folded diagonally or with all sides folded up. It's important to arrest the balance before moving it to a more convenient location and also before adding or removing weight from the left or right pan. Stand at a comfortable distance directly in front of the balance, keeping the midline of your nose lined up with the central point on the index plate. If draft affects reliable performance of the balance, close the lid and make sure the weighing paper isn't touching it to stabilize the pan. Establish equilibrium with weighing paper on the pans by adjusting leveling screws located at the bottom front corners so that the pointer is centered at the 0 mark. Avoid a front-to-back tilt by adjusting both leveling screws. If a front-to-back tilt is observed, turn both leveling screws in the same direction until the tilt is removed. Weights should always be placed on the right pan using forceps. Substances to be weighed should always be placed on the left pan using a spatula. The dialer has both metric and apothecary scales. Always use a spatula to transfer substances from their stock containers. Never dump excess material back into the stock container. Instead, place it on a separate weighing paper. Always label all substances. Arrest and properly store the torsion balance. Clean your lab area before leaving. Let's review. The metric, apothecary, and avoirdupois systems are the 3 most common systems used in compounding. The metric system is more commonly used and more accurate than the apothecary system. Weights should be of good quality and cared for in order to ensure weighing accuracy. Metric weights are used for analytical purposes and range from 1 milligram to 100 grams. It's more accurate and convenient to use the dialer or rider to measure smaller milligram quantities. Apothecary system comes with block, flat, or wire weights. Apothecary round, flat brass drams are prone to corrosion and should be removed from pharmacies and replaced. Apothecary aluminum wire weights and flat grain weights are less corrosive. The number of sides on the apothecary wire weight corresponds to weight in grains, except in the case of a half grain, which is represented by a bent wire. Always store weights in its original packaging after use. Always use forceps when handling weights, not with bare hands or gloves, in order to preserve its integrity and weighing accuracy. Let's review. The sensitivity requirement test determines the minimum weight required to move the pointer on the marker plate one division. When testing the balance, always place weights directly on the pan. Weighing paper and weigh bolts should not be used. Use a linear regression program, for example, a graphing calculator or a Microsoft Excel program, to make a graph and determine its best fit equation. Sensitivity values that can't accurately be reflected on the marker plate should be excluded. Solving the best fit equation for x and setting y equals 1 for one division will give you a sensitivity requirement that must be less than 6 milligrams. If the sensitivity requirement test fails, the balance needs to be serviced. Let's review. Prescription balances must be tested to ensure that they are operating properly. The arm ratio test checks for the equality of length of both arms of the balance. The shift test checks the arm and lever components of the balance. The rider and graduated beam test checks the accuracy of the calibrated dial or rider on the balance. A balance is acceptable only if it passes all 4 tests, including the sensitivity requirement test, arm ratio test, shift test, and rider and graduated beam test. Test your balance monthly and even more frequently if the balance is used extensively to ensure it is working properly. If any of these tests fail, the balance needs to be serviced. "22 rules that one must remember when using the torsion balance include: Number 1. The prescription balance selected for use must have been previously tested and determined to be acceptable. 2. Use the balance on a level surface and in a draft-free area. 3. If drafts affect reliable performance of balance, close balance lid to stabilize pans. 4. Always level balance with leveling screws left to right and front to back before using balance for weighing. 5. Always determine the balance sensitivity with marker plate before starting a compounding process. 6. Always use weighing paper or weighing boats. 7. Always have weighing papers or weigh boats on both pans to maintain balance level. 8. Always arrest the balance before adding or removing weight or ingredients from pans. 9. Never weigh less than 120 milligrams of any ingredient on balance or higher weight per balance sensitivity. 10. Never weigh more than 120 grams on the balance. 11. Always use a spatula to transfer ingredients to and from the balance. 12. Never pour ingredients directly out of stock bottle, especially large bottles. 13. After weighing an ingredient, never return extra ingredients back into the stock bottle. 14. Handle weights with forceps or with gloved hands. Return weights to storage box after use. 15. Always add weights to the right pan. 16. Use appropriate scales of weights, metric or apothecary, with weights, rider, or dial. 17. Always add powder to be weighed to the left pan. 18. After weighing, never leave anything, powders, mixtures, etc., unlabeled. 19. When determining a filled capsule weight or filled powder paper weight, an empty capsule or powder paper must be placed on the opposite pan. 20. Always arrest the balance when finished using. 21. Always clean the entire balance and close the lid before storing. Use a vacuum if needed for large powder spills. 22. Always zero the balance internal weights, dial, or rider.